What you're about to hear is the story of a divorced dad named Phil, who had the most boring, normal custody arrangement in the world. 50-50. Week on, week off, totally civil. Then his ex started dating a guy who thought screaming at an 8-year-old in a driveway was acceptable parenting. Phil noticed his kids changing, going quiet, walking on eggshells, flinching at loud noises. So he did what any good dad would do. He bought a Ring camera, and what it caught over the next 2 months gave a family court judge everything she needed to make one of the fastest custody decisions I've ever heard of. Strap in. My ex's new boyfriend was screaming at my kids during drop-offs. I installed Ring cameras and got full custody in 2 months. I need to get this out because I've been holding it together for months, and I think if I don't write it down somewhere, I'm gonna lose it. Not in a dramatic way. Just in that quiet way where you realize you've been clenching your jaw for 6 weeks straight and your dentist asks if everything's okay at home. So here's the deal. My name's Phil. I'm 34. I work as a fleet maintenance coordinator for a regional courier company outside of Columbus. Basically, I make sure delivery vans don't fall apart on the highway. I diagnose problems, order parts, schedule repairs, keep logs. It's not glamorous, but it pays decent, and I'm good at it. Been there 7 years. My ex-wife Lori and I split up about 3 years ago. No huge blowout, no affair, nothing like that. We just stopped working. You know that thing where you're sitting across from someone at dinner, and you both know there's nothing left to talk about, but neither of you wants to say it? That was us for about a year and a half before we finally called it. I remember one Saturday we were both in the living room. She was on her phone, I was watching a game, and Caleb asked us to play a board game with him. We both said, in a minute, at the exact same time, without even looking at each other. And I just thought, man, this is it. This is what we've turned into. 2 people sharing a mortgage and a Wi-Fi password. We did the whole thing through a mediator. Kept it clean. Agreed on 50-50 custody of our 2 kids, Caleb, who's 8 now, and Nora, who just turned 6. I moved into a 3-bedroom rental about 10 minutes from Lori's place. Nothing fancy. Brown siding, small yard, detached garage. But it had a good kitchen and enough room for the kids to each have their own space, so it worked. And honestly, for the first 2 years, the arrangement worked fine. We lived about 12 minutes apart. I had the kids Sunday night through Thursday morning. She had them Thursday after school through Sunday evening. We switched off holidays. Communication was mostly through a co-parenting app. Short messages, pickup times, doctor appointments, report cards, businesslike but respectful. I never had a problem with Lori as a co-parent. She was solid. Then about 8 months ago, she started dating someone. I found out through Caleb, actually. He mentioned it casually one night during dinner. He said Mommy's friend Garrett was at the house a lot, and that Garrett had a loud truck. I didn't press him on it. Kids shouldn't feel like they're being interrogated about what happens at the other parent's house. That's a rule I've always kept. So I just said something like, "Oh, that's cool, buddy," and moved on. I'll be straight with you. I didn't care that Lori was dating. Honestly, I'd been seeing someone casually for a few months myself. Didn't work out, but that's a different story. Lori's personal life was none of my business, as long as it didn't affect the kids. And at first, it didn't seem to. But about 4 months in, things started shifting. It was small stuff at first. Caleb started getting quiet during drop-offs. Not upset quiet. More like careful quiet. Like he was picking his words. Nora started asking to stay at my house on days she was supposed to go to her mom's. She didn't throw a fit or anything. She'd just casually say, "Can I stay here tonight, Daddy?" in this real soft voice. And when I'd explain that tonight was Mommy's night, she'd nod and go get her bag without arguing. Which honestly bothered me more than if she'd cried. I started paying closer attention. When I'd buckle them into their car seats on Thursday mornings, or whenever Lori picked them up, I noticed Caleb would get stiff. His shoulders would go up near his ears. He used to wave goodbye out the window every single time. Now he'd just stare straight ahead. Nora would get real clingy right before I handed them off. She'd hug my leg and not let go until the last second. One time, she gripped my hand so tight in the driveway that I could feel her little fingernails through my work gloves. And there were other things too. Caleb stopped talking about what happened at Mom's house. Used to be he'd come back on Sunday nights full of stories. They went to the park, they watched a movie, Nora spilled juice on the couch, whatever. Kid stuff. Now he'd come home and go straight to his room and close the door. He's 8. 8-year-olds don't close doors unless something's wrong. Nora started carrying her stuffed elephant everywhere again, which she'd stopped doing like a year earlier. She'd clutch it in the car, at the dinner table, on the couch. Like a security blanket she'd outgrown but suddenly needed back. One night, this was maybe late October, Caleb was doing homework at the kitchen table, and I asked him how things were going at Mom's. Not in a leading way, just casual. And he said fine. But then after a few seconds he looked up and said, "Dad, does Garrett live with us now?" I told him I didn't know and asked why he was asking. He said, "Because he's always there and he gets mad a lot." I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face normal. I asked what he meant by mad. He just shrugged and said, "Like loud mad." That was it. He went back to his homework, and I didn't push it. I spent the next 2 days going back and forth in my head about what to do. I thought about texting Lori directly. I thought about asking Caleb more questions. I thought about a dozen things. But here's the thing about being a divorced dad. You have to be careful. You say the wrong thing. You push too hard. You come off as jealous or controlling, and suddenly you're the problem. I'd seen it happen to guys at work. One wrong move and the whole narrative flips. So I did what I do at work when a truck keeps coming back with the same issue and nobody can figure out why. I documented. I started keeping a log. Dates. Observations. Things the kids said, word for word. Behaviors I noticed. I kept it in a notebook in my bedside drawer. Old school, no app, no cloud, just a composition notebook from the dollar store and a pen. My buddy Hank at work saw me writing in it during lunch one day and asked if I was starting a journal. I told him to mind his business and eat his turkey club. Around early November, I made a decision. I bought a Ring doorbell camera and a second Ring camera, one of the stick-up ones, and installed them at my house. One on the front door covering the porch and driveway. One on the garage angled toward the street. My thinking was simple. Drop-offs and pickups happened in my driveway. If something was going on, I wanted it on video. Now let me be clear. I wasn't trying to spy on Lori. I wasn't recording inside her house or tracking her car or anything like that. My cameras were on my property, pointed at my driveway and my front yard. Totally legal. I even mentioned it to Lori in the co-parenting app. Sent her a message that said, "Hey, just installed some security cameras at the house FYI. Been some package thefts in the neighborhood." She said, "Okay, thanks for the heads up." That was it. The first 2 weeks, nothing happened. Normal drop-offs. Lori would pull up, kids would get out, I'd wave, done. Or I'd walk them to her car, buckle them in, she'd drive off. Garrett wasn't there for any of those. Then came the Thursday before Thanksgiving. Lori pulled up to get the kids, but she wasn't driving. Garrett was. Big silver pickup truck, the kind that's way too clean to have ever hauled anything. Lori was in the passenger seat. I walked the kids out to the driveway with their bags, and that's when I saw Garrett get out of the truck. First time I'd seen him in person. Stocky guy, maybe 5'10", buzz cut. Wraparound sunglasses pushed up on his head, even though it was like 40 degrees out. He had that energy, you know the type. The guy who walks into a room and immediately needs everyone to know he's there. Stands too close, talks too loud, laughs at his own jokes. He didn't say anything to me, didn't even look at me. Just stood by the truck with his arms crossed like he was bouncing at a club nobody wanted to get into. I loaded the kids' bags into the back seat and tried to read the room. Lori wouldn't make eye contact either. She was scrolling on her phone. Fine, whatever. I don't need to be best friends with the guy. I'm not out here trying to set up a group chat. But then Caleb dropped his backpack getting into the truck. It hit the ground and a couple things spilled out. A folder, some crayons, his water bottle. Normal kid stuff. And before I could even bend down to help him pick it up, Garrett snapped. He yelled, yelled, right at Caleb. Something along the lines of, "Are you kidding me? Pick that up. You're always dropping stuff. What is wrong with you?" Right there in my driveway. Caleb froze. Just stood there with his eyes wide. Nora shrank back against the truck door. I straightened up and looked at Garrett. He looked back at me like he was daring me to say something. and I wanted to. Every single part of me wanted to get in his face and tell him that if he ever spoke to my son like that again, I would, but I didn't. I bent down, helped Caleb pick up his stuff, put my hand on his shoulder and said, "You're fine, buddy, it's just a backpack." Then I looked at Lori, who was sitting in the passenger seat staring straight ahead, like she was trying to become invisible. She didn't say a word. I closed the truck door. They drove off. I walked inside, sat down on my couch, and replayed it in my head about 30 times. Then I checked the Ring app. Both cameras caught it. The driveway cam got the whole thing. Crystal clear audio, Garrett's face, Caleb freezing up, all of it. I saved the clip, downloaded it to my laptop, backed it up on a USB drive, and I wrote down every detail in my notebook. It was a Thursday. Wait, no, Wednesday. The day before Thanksgiving. I remember because the kids were supposed to be with Lori through the holiday weekend, and I spent Thanksgiving alone eating leftover pasta and watching old games on TV, thinking about whether my kids were okay. Hold on. For those listening, this is me jumping in, not Phil. I need you to sit with what just happened for a second. This dude, the boyfriend, just screamed at an 8-year-old over a dropped backpack. A backpack. Not a laptop, not a priceless vase, a backpack full of crayons. This is the kind of guy who peeks in a pickup truck commercial and thinks yelling at children makes him an alpha. He's basically a Dollar General version of every villain in a Lifetime movie. All bark, no brain, and zero self-awareness. And Lori just sat there like a mannequin at a JCPenney going out of business sale. But Phil? Phil's playing chess. Keep listening. After Thanksgiving, the drop-off schedule went back to normal. And I watched those Ring recordings like a hawk. December was quiet for the first couple weeks. Lori did most of the pickups herself. Garrett showed up twice but stayed in the truck both times and didn't interact with the kids at all. I noted every single one of those drop-offs in my notebook anyway. Dates, times, who was present, what happened, what didn't happen. Then December 19th, Lori pulled up with Garrett driving again. This time when Nora was walking to the truck, she tripped on the curb. You know how 6-year-olds are, they trip over air, and started crying. Not screaming, just that quiet whimper, where the lip pokes out. Garrett got out of the truck and told her to stop crying and get in. His exact words on the Ring audio were, "Knock it off and get in the truck. We don't have time for this." She's 6. I picked Nora up, wiped her face, told her she was okay, and carried her to the truck myself. Garrett was standing there with his jaw clenched. I put her in her seat, kissed her forehead, and said, "See you Sunday, sweet pea." Then I walked back inside without looking at him. Saved the clip. Downloaded it. Backed it up. Wrote it down. I wanted to call Lori that night. I really did. But I knew that if I confronted her about it directly, one of two things would happen. Either she'd get defensive and accuse me of overreacting, which would tip Garrett off that he was being watched. Or she'd agree with me privately, but nothing would change because she was clearly afraid to stand up to him. Neither of those outcomes helped my kids, so I kept my mouth shut and kept logging. I also started doing something I probably should have done earlier. I began taking screenshots of the Ring clips with timestamps visible and emailing them to myself, so I'd have a backup in my inbox with a date stamp that couldn't be disputed. I know that sounds overly cautious, but when you work in fleet maintenance, you learn pretty quick that the one time you don't log something is the one time you need the record. I wasn't going to make that mistake with my kids. Anyway, Christmas came and went. I had the kids Christmas morning per our agreement. Best morning of the year, like always. Caleb got this model truck kit he'd been asking about for months. One of those ones with like 200 tiny pieces that takes forever. And Nora got a set of those massive art markers she loves. The kind that bleed through paper onto whatever's underneath, which I found out the hard way when she colored on the kitchen table. We made pancakes, used way too much syrup. It was good. But that afternoon when I drove them to Lori's for the second half of Christmas, I could feel Caleb tense up in the back seat. He didn't say anything. He just got quiet. And when I walked them to the door, Garrett opened it, standing right there in the doorway like he owned the place. He didn't say Merry Christmas or thanks or hello. He just stepped aside and let the kids walk in. Caleb looked back at me once. Just once. And the look on that kid's face, I can't describe it. I don't want to. I drove home and sat in my truck in the garage for maybe 20 minutes. My buddy Hank texted me asking if I wanted to come over for leftover ham and a movie. I said maybe later. I didn't go. January 5th. Lori drops the kids off at my place after school. As Caleb's getting out of the car, I hear Garrett, who's in the passenger seat this time, say something to Caleb through the open window. The ring catches the audio. He said, "And next time, don't leave your shoes in the hallway or I'm throwing them in the trash." Over shoes. I didn't react. I took the kids inside, made dinner, spaghetti, Caleb's favorite, and after they went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table with my notebook and the ring footage from the last 2 months, and I made a decision. Enough. Pause for a second. I want to talk about what's happening inside Lori's head here because it matters. She's watching this guy bark at her children and doing nothing. And I know some of you are thinking she's just as bad. But real talk, I think she's stuck in that thing where you let someone slowly turn up the volume, and by the time it's deafening, you've convinced yourself it's normal. She's not evil. She's just lost the plot. The problem is her kids are paying the rent on her bad decisions, and Phil's the only one in this entire story who seems to remember that kids aren't props. They're people. Okay, back to it. The next Monday, I called a family law attorney. Guy named Russell Whitmore. Came recommended by a coworker whose brother went through a brutal custody fight a few years back. I sat down in his office during my lunch break and laid everything out. The notebook, the ring footage, the 4 separate incidents, the changes in the kids' behavior. Russell watched all 4 clips back to back without saying a word. I sat across from him in this leather chair that squeaked every time I moved and tried not to read his face. When the last clip ended, he took off his glasses, set them on the desk, and said, "How soon do you want to file?" I told him yesterday. He explained the process to me. In our state, you can file for an emergency modification of custody if you can demonstrate that the child's current living situation poses a risk to their physical or emotional well-being. He said there were 2 ways to approach it. You either go in with one dramatic incident and hope the judge takes it seriously, or you go in with a documented pattern that shows ongoing harm. He said the footage alone was strong, but the behavior log, the notebook, was what would really set us apart. 4 incidents across 2 months with dates, times, exact quotes, and corroborating video. That's not one bad day. That's a pattern. And patterns are what judges act on. He asked me a bunch of questions. How long had Garrett been around? Had the kids said anything specific? Had their school performance changed? Had I noticed any physical signs of abuse? I answered everything as honestly as I could. No, I hadn't seen bruises or marks. But the behavioral shifts were real and they were getting worse. Russell charged me a retainer that made my eyes water a little bit, but I signed the agreement without hesitating. Some things are worth every dollar. We filed the motion on January 21st. Now here's the part that surprised me. I expected Lori to fight it. I expected her to hire a lawyer, file a counter motion, paint me as an obsessive, controlling ex who was trying to use cameras to manipulate the situation. I braced for a war. What I got was a phone call. Lori called me the night after she was served. She was crying, not yelling, crying. And she said, "I'll never forget this." She said, "I know. That's it. I know." She told me that things with Garrett had gotten worse, that he'd been aggressive with the kids inside the house too, that Caleb had started wetting the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 4, that Nora had been having nightmares. She said she'd been wanting to end things with Garrett for weeks, but that she was scared of him, not just for the kids, for herself. I sat there on the phone and I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to ask her why she didn't come to me sooner. Part of me wanted to yell, but a bigger part of me, the part that spent 7 years diagnosing problems and fixing them before they got worse, just said, "We'll figure this out, but the kids have to come first." She agreed. She didn't fight the custody modification. Her lawyer and Russell worked out the terms. Lori would get supervised visitation on weekends. Not because she was a bad mom, but because as long as Garrett was in the picture, the court couldn't guarantee the kids' safety. She accepted that. I honestly think she was relieved. The court date was February 11th. I showed up in my best pair of khakis and a button-down I hadn't worn since my cousin's wedding. Russell had told me to look like the dependable, boring dad I am. His words. I didn't take offense. Lori was there. She looked exhausted. Not angry, not combative, Just tired. Her lawyer sat next to her and didn't object to a single thing Russell presented. Russell played the ring footage for the judge. All 4 incidents. Back to back. He had them queued up on a laptop connected to a monitor that the judge could see from the bench. I watched the judge's face while she watched the footage, and I swear her expression didn't change once during the first 2 clips. Stone cold. But on the third one, the one where Garrett told Nora to knock it off after she tripped, her jaw tightened. Just barely. You'd miss it if you weren't looking. On the 4th clip, she closed her eyes for a second after it ended. Then she took her glasses off and set them on the bench. The courtroom was dead quiet. You could hear the ventilation humming. The judge, an older woman, very no-nonsense, the kind of person who's clearly seen every version of every custody dispute and doesn't have patience for games, looked directly at Lori and asked one question. Is this man still in contact with your children? Lori said no. She said she'd ended things with Garrett 2 weeks after being served. She said he'd moved out. Her voice was shaking, but she held it together. The judge looked at the footage timestamps, looked at my behavior log. Russell had submitted it as a supporting exhibit with a table of contents and date index. The man is thorough. And looked at the kids' school records, which showed a dip in Caleb's grades and 2 separate incidents where Nora had been sent to the nurse's office for stomach aches that had no medical explanation. Stress does that to kids. Their bodies carry what their words can't. The judge asked Lori's attorney if there was any objection to the modification. He said no. She asked if there was anything else either party wanted to add. Russell said no. Lori's attorney said no. That was it. She granted the modification. Full physical custody to me. Lori got every other weekend supervised visitation with a gradual step-up plan if she could demonstrate that Garrett was permanently out of the picture and the home environment was stable. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pump my fist or high-five Russell or do any of that. I just sat there and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in months. Like I'd been holding my breath since October, and somebody finally told me I could exhale. Russell shook my hand in the hallway outside the courtroom and said, "You did the right thing." I nodded. I think I said thank you. Honestly, I don't remember exactly because my brain was doing that thing where it goes kind of foggy after you've been running on adrenaline for hours, and it finally stops. I sat in my truck in the courthouse parking lot for a while before driving home. Called my mom. She cried. I almost did too, but I held it because I was in a public parking lot, and I don't know, that felt weird. She said she was proud of me and that my dad would have been too. He passed about 5 years ago. Heart attack. Random thing to bring up. But it hit me in that moment because he was the kind of dad who would have done exactly what I did. Quiet, steady, documented everything. He used to keep a logbook for his lawnmower maintenance. I think I got it from him. Okay, timeout. Can we talk about the real MVP of this story for a second? It's a Ring doorbell camera that costs like $50 on sale. Phil didn't hire a team of investigators. He didn't go full Taken. He bought the same gadget your neighbor uses to catch porch pirates stealing Amazon packages and turned it into a custody case exhibit. If Ring ever needs a commercial, forget the cute family waving at the mailman. Just use Phil's footage and the tagline, "Ring, because some people shouldn't be around kids." I'd buy stock. Anyway, the story's not done yet. Final update. It's been about 2 months since the ruling. The kids are doing better. Not perfect, but better. Caleb's grades are coming back up. His teacher sent me an email last week saying he'd aced a science quiz on the water cycle, which I know sounds small, but 3 months ago this kid was barely turning in homework. He's starting to be a normal, loud, goofy 8-year-old again, making fart jokes, leaving Lego pieces everywhere for me to step on at 2 in the morning. He joined a flag football team last month, and honestly, he's terrible at it. But he runs around out there with this big dumb grin on his face, and that's all I care about. I sit in my camping chair on the sideline every Saturday morning with a coffee and just watch him be a kid. That's it. That's the whole thing. Nora's sleeping through the night more often. She still has a rough night here and there, but the nightmares are less frequent, and she's back to being her chatty little self. She talks nonstop now, about everything, about what she ate for lunch, about what her friend Kennedy said at recess, about the squirrel she saw on the fence, about why purple is better than blue. I miss that. I miss the noise. She told me the other day that she wants to be a veterinarian or a race car driver. I told her she could be both. Lori and I are on decent terms. Not great. There's a lot that hasn't been said between us, and I don't know if it ever will be. But she shows up for her visits, she's engaged with the kids when she's there, and the supervisors have had zero issues to report. I think losing primary custody was a wake-up call for her. I hope it was, for the kids' sake. As for Garrett, the boyfriend, I have no idea where he is and I don't care. What I know is that he's not around my children anymore. That's the only thing that matters. Lori mentioned once that he tried to contact her after everything went down and she blocked him. I didn't ask for details. Not my business. As long as he stays gone, we're good. Russell Whitmore, my attorney, was worth every penny. He told me after the hearing that judges see a lot of he said she said in custody cases, and that having clear, time-stamped video evidence with audio was what made the difference. He also said the notebook, the handwritten behavior log, showed the court that I wasn't reacting emotionally to a single incident. I was tracking a pattern. He said that matters more than people realize. My coworker Hank asked me last week how everything turned out. I told him the short version. He nodded and said, "Good for you, man," and then asked if I wanted half his sandwich because his wife packed him two by accident. It was roast beef. I took it. I guess the thing I keep coming back to is this. Nobody was going to save my kids except me. Lori couldn't because she was trapped in a bad situation and couldn't see her way out. The school didn't know what was happening. The kids couldn't articulate it. It was on me. And I almost didn't do anything because I was afraid of rocking the boat. Afraid of being seen as the difficult ex. Afraid that if I pushed too hard, I'd lose what I already had. But here's what I learned. Documenting isn't overreacting. Installing cameras on your own property isn't paranoia. Writing things down in a dollar store notebook isn't being dramatic. Sometimes being the boring, methodical, systematic guy is exactly what your kids need you to be. I fix trucks for a living. I find the problem, I document it, I order the part, I schedule the repair. Turns out that same approach works when the thing that's broken is your custody agreement. I still have the notebook in my bedside drawer. I haven't written in it in weeks. That feels good. One thing I haven't totally figured out is how to talk to Caleb about all of it when he's older. He's 8. He knows things changed. He knows he lives with me full time now. He knows the visits with mom are different, but he doesn't know about the cameras or the court hearing or any of the behind-the-scenes stuff. Someday he's going to ask, and I don't know yet what I'm going to say. I've turned it over in my head 100 times, and I still don't have the words. Maybe by the time he asks, I will. Maybe I won't. Guess I'll figure that out when I get there. For now, my kids are safe. They're sleeping in their own beds down the hall from me. Caleb's nightlight is on. He still won't admit he uses it, but I can see it glowing under his door. And Nora's stuffed elephant is tucked under her arm like always. That's enough. That's everything. So yeah, that's my story. If you're a dad going through something similar, or a mom, doesn't matter, just document everything. Be patient. Be boring. Be the person your kids can count on even when they can't tell you what's wrong. The system is slow and frustrating, but it does work if you give it something to work with. Would I do it all again? Every single part. Without hesitation. Anyway, thanks for reading this. It felt good to finally write it all down somewhere other than a composition notebook. Did I handle this right? Would you have done anything differently? Hold on before we wrap up. I want to point something out that I think a lot of people will miss. Phil literally used the same skill set from his day job to save his kids. He finds problems, documents them, and schedules the fix. That's what he did here. Except the busted part wasn't a transmission, it was a custody order. This man treated the boyfriend like a check engine light that wouldn't turn off and filed the repair order with the court. If there's a Dad of the Year award somewhere, Phil doesn't need it. He's too busy making spaghetti and watching flag football. And honestly, that's better than any trophy. Look, Phil didn't do anything flashy. No confrontation, no viral moment, no screaming match in the driveway. He bought a camera, kept a notebook, and let the evidence speak for itself. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is just be steady when everything around you is falling apart. If this story hit you in the chest, and I know it did, drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. Would you have confronted Garrett on the spot? Would you have called Lori first? Or would you have gone the Phil route and played the long game? Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.